Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and the 2020 Advent Calendar of Christmas horror movies continues, this time with the 2018 entry, Await Further Instructions. Currently available to stream on Netflix, at least in the US, and available to rent through a number of different streaming options. This movie was directed by Johnny Kevorkian and written by Gavin Williams. So this movie opens with the characters of Nick and Angie, played by Sam Gittins and Nirja Naik, respectively, as they are going to Nick's family's for the Christmas break. Nick isn't terribly, tight-knit with his family. He doesn't really call them, doesn't really see them that often. There's some separation going on there. But regardless, Angie wants to meet them, so off they go. And Nick is trepidatious, to say the least. And I think that seems to be pretty well founded as soon as they walk through the door, because Nick's mom is a sweetheart, but terribly timid and passive, especially in the wake of his father, played by Grant Masters. Also there is his expecting sister and his brother-in-law, as well as his grandfather, played by the incomparable David Bradley. And I say that his fears are somewhat well-founded because, as soon as they walk through the door, we get introduced to all these characters, and their true colors are just barely below the surface. The superficial veneer of pleasantries is quickly given way to slights and racism and guilt and so on and so forth. It's a pretty toxic family dynamic, and I can see why Nick was wanting to be separate from it. So what could be the worst thing that could happen with a toxic family environment that you just want to get away from? Not being able to. As Nick and Angie find out when they want to duck out in the middle of the night, they've done what they could. Peace out. We're fucking gone. And unfortunately, as soon as they open the door, they find that the entire house, doors, windows, everything, has been barricaded flush with an impenetrable, solid metal something. They are trapped. They are cut off. There is no internet. There is no cell service. All the clocks have stopped at 3 o'clock. And the TV is the only lifeline they have to the outside world, and the only thing it says is, await further instructions. Okay, so I know that I've been beating a dead horse with this, but here we go again. Something that I'm excited about. It's a small, contained environment, and it's a simple setup. It's a simple concept and a simple idea, and I love it. So I'm absolutely just immediately on board with everything about this. It's just the worst of circumstances that you can put people in as far as toxic family environment. They can't get away from each other. There's this mystery abound as far as what the hell is actually going on. How do they conquer it, triumph over it, whatever, or even at least cope with it? And how bad can it get from there? Well, as we know from watching similar stories such as the Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, shit like this can go wrong fast, and it does. As the family kind of squabbles about whether or not to obey the TV when it starts coming up with worse and worse and worse instructions and grander and bolder and more dangerous instructions, whether or not to simply comply with them or to give it independent thought and question that authority, leads to a lot of, let's just say, butting heads. I personally thought that this had all the hallmarks of a great horror movie. It was a great mystery through and through. It was a great thought experiment. It was just fantastic tragedy. It was good characters. Sometimes, yes, a bit one-dimensional, a bit stereotypical. But honestly, I think in a way almost more real as a result of it, because when we're talking about family members just in the raw at Christmas time and under extreme circumstances, sometimes people fall into their worst natures, and to see that come to light so quickly and so readily, I'd like to say that we would be a little bit more nuanced than that. But are we? Would we? I don't know. So it's a good thought experiment in that regard too, as far as the characters. Honestly, everything about this I love. The special effects were amazing. The body gore and horror elements were just fantastic. There were genuinely scary moments. Everything had me on the edge of my seat. I didn't know what would happen. This was a great movie through and through. And I've seen some people complain about the ending, but honestly, I'm going to keep this spoiler free, but I am going to have a spoiled rotten discussion video about that accompanying this one, so keep an eye out for it if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. Suffice it to say, I don't agree with those folks that are having trouble with it. I actually think that it leads to a lot more thought and discussion and that kind of thing, which I honestly really love in a horror movie. So maybe it just seemed a little bit coming out of left field, but honestly, considering the circumstances of the rest of the movie, I don't think so. It honestly was one of those things as far as me theorizing throughout the film. Yeah, it was a possibility that was springing up in my mind. So it was a remote one, but it was one nonetheless. So it didn't entirely come out of left field for me. I honestly thought it was a bit fitting. There's a whole lot to unpack in this one beyond the surface level. There is discussion and subtext aplenty in this movie. We're talking about things from questioning authority and independent thought right down to religion and who do we worship under what circumstances. This movie raises a whole lot of questions and it just leads to a whole lot of discussion. So for me, this was a stupendous piece of Christmas horror fare that I found thoughtful and intelligent and mysterious and scary all rolled into one. And based on that, I highly recommend the 2018 movie Await Further Instructions. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you do want to get into a spoiler-filled discussion about this, please look for my Spoiled Rotten accompanying video with this. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.